And then let's cultivate our motivation and to really ensure that what we're about to do has a strong impact on our own minds and a virtuous one at that. Then let's generate the bodhicitta motivation, looking far into the distance and very expansive in including all sentient beings in our aspiration to attain full awakening, so that we'll have the wisdom, compassion, and skillful means to be of the greatest benefit. And so take a moment and make that your motivation for our sharing the Dharma together this evening. Okay. So, as I mentioned last night, when this idea of doing a Lamrim style book with His Holiness came up, partway through it he said that he really wanted it to be unique and to contain material from the other Buddhist traditions, so that we could expand, as Tibetan Buddhists, we could expand our horizon and also, come to see how skillful the Buddha was in terms of describing things in different ways for people who have so many different interests and dispositions and so forth. So last night I talked a little bit about generating bodhicitta, and then mostly from the Chinese tradition. But as somebody remarked to me afterwards, if I hadn't said before that I was talking about it from the perspective of the Chinese tradition, they would have thought I was talking about it from the perspective of the Tibetan tradition. So that's kind of the point. This way you can see, how closely the traditions come together instead of seeing different Buddhist traditions as, so separate and dissimilar. And then tonight I'm going to talk about the paramitas, or in Pali the term is paramis. So these are the perfections or the far-reaching practices. So the practices that you do after having generated bodhicitta, that you perfect on the path to full awakening. And so here I'm going to describe it pretty much from the perspective of the Pali tradition, and then if we have time, go briefly over the Sanskrit tradition, which we and the Chinese Buddhists share together. What's interesting in the Pali tradition is that sometimes we hear, those Theravada people, the Theravada being, descendants from the Pali tradition, they don't have compassion. They're very selfish. And have you heard this? Sometimes because, they're just looking for their own liberation, not like us. We're very compassionate. We're working for the enlightenment of all beings. And, so they don't have the perfections in their training like we do. So this is, another one of the many misconceptions that Buddhist traditions have about each other, which is one of the reasons why I'm trying to include perspectives from the different traditions together, so that people can clear up some of these misconceptions. So, yes, there are Theravada practitioners who, develop great compassion. They meditate on the four immeasurables just like we do, and they develop them to the point where can abide in a state of single-pointed concentration, in the form realm absorptions upon the objects of love, compassion, joy, or equanimity. Okay, so same as our tradition. And then what is very interesting is, I scratched a little deeper and I discovered that there is a text in the Pali tradition written by Dhammapala. Okay, so he was a great Pali commentator, and he wrote this text called A Treatise on the Paramis, a treatise on the perfections, in which he described the Bodhisattva practice from the viewpoint of the Pali tradition. Okay, so this was not a canonical text. It's something that came several centuries later. And Bhikkhu Bodhi was telling me that some parts of Dhammapala's text apparently were copied from Asanga's Bodhisattva Bhumi. So, they a little bit of, how people nowadays, you copy from somebody else's stuff. And yeah, so it happened back then too. So, but it's a fascinating text. It's been translated into English, so you can read it. And so I wanted to talk about the section on the paramis, or the perfections, from the viewpoint of the Pali tradition. So just as the Mahayana, or the Sanskrit tradition, we have 10 perfections. The Pali also has 10 perfections. The enumeration, exactly what the 10 are, is not exactly the same. There's many of them that overlap, however, and the order isn't exactly the same. But even of those where there's some difference, where one has a certain paramita that the other one doesn't, somewhere else in the teachings of the other one, the same idea is found. Even if it's not called one of the perfections, the idea is still there. So in the Sanskrit tradition, there's 10. It's often abbreviated to 6, with the last 4 being combined in the 6th one. So in the Sanskrit tradition, some of you may know them. What's the first one? Generosity. Second? Yeah, ethical conduct or morality. Third? Patience, or I like to translate it as fortitude. I like that translation better. Fourth? Joyous effort. Yeah. Fifth? Yeah, concentration or meditative stability. Sixth? Wisdom. Seventh? So we're so used to hearing 6 that we don't know the last 4. 7th is skillful means. Okay. 8th is, I like to translate it as unshakable resolve. The Tibetans translate it as prayers, which is quite confusing, and the Chinese translate it as vows, which also is confusing. But it's unshakable resolves. You make a resolve to do something, and you don't move from it. 9th is the perfection of power, and 10th is pristine wisdom. Okay, so those are the ones from the Sanskrit tradition, okay, in that order. Then the Pali tradition, okay, it starts out the same. It starts out with generosity, and ethical conduct is the second one. Then in the Pali tradition, the third one is renunciation. Okay. Then the fourth is wisdom. So wisdom comes much earlier here. 5th is joyous effort. Yeah. 6th is fortitude. 7th is truthfulness. Yeah. 8 is determination. 9 is love and compassion. And 10 is equanimity. Okay? So you can see there's a lot of overlap. Generosity, ethical conduct, wisdom, joyous effort, fortitude. Though those 5 overlap specifically with the Sanskrit tradition. But the other ones in the Pali that are not specifically labeled perfections in the Sanskrit tradition, the meaning is still taught there. Renunciation, truthfulness, determination, love and compassion, and equanimity. They're still found in the Sanskrit teachings. Okay? So let's start at the beginning and just talk a little bit briefly about each one of them. There's actually a lot you can say about each one. So I will try and get through the list. I am famous for not completing things, but I'll try. Okay? So generosity is giving of ourselves and our belongings. Okay? So it's based on non-attachment and on the relinquishing of miserliness and greediness, greed. Okay? So generosity, we give our body, we give our possessions, we give our life, we give our virtue for sentient beings. So there's the generosity. This is from the Pali tradition. It's the same as the Sanskrit. There's the generosity of material possessions. Yeah. The generosity of fearlessness or offering protection to those who are in danger. And then the generosity of giving the Dharma. Okay, so bodhisattvas, when they practice generosity, they give whatever is needed to whoever needs it. Okay, and they give even if somebody doesn't request, let alone if somebody does request. They give a suitable amount, not just, enough to kind of slow the other person down so they go away. But they give a suitable amount. And they give without expecting to receive a gift in return or to receive praise or even a thank you. Okay? So that last part is difficult, isn't it? Yeah, you don't think so? The last part, to be able to give without expecting a gift in return or a thank you or some kind of praise. Yeah. We kind of think, well, I'm just giving, I'm not expecting anything. Yeah. But then when somebody doesn't say thank you and gets mad at us, we're insulted. Yeah. But here, that's because of our afflictions. Yeah, we feel let down and insulted. Yeah, I did this for you, I need some recognition. For bodhisattvas, the act of giving itself is the joy. Yeah, because we can't control if the other person receives our gift or how they receive it. Yeah, so we have to do it with a motivation totally without expectation, where just the act of giving becomes the reward or the delight. Okay, so giving it in terms of material possessions, we have to be careful here and make sure that things are given to the right people at the right time. Yeah, if somebody is an alcoholic and they come to you for money, you don't give them money if you know that they're going to go spend it on some booze. That is not generosity. Okay? you know. And so similarly, they have stories of bodhisattvas giving their body. Some of the stories are kind of interesting. It seems like they didn't use very much wisdom and just gave their body, and somebody else was, parts of their body, and somebody else was unappreciative. But actually, I think the stories, when they're told that way, they're to indicate just giving without attachment. But actually, whenever we give something, we should make sure that it's going to be used in a proper way and not abused. Okay? If a bodhisattva discovers that they're attached to some object, they immediately give it away. So they see attachment as like fire, and practice generosity is the way of putting out that fire. Okay? We're kind of the opposite, isn't it? We get attached to something, we hold on to it tighter and don't want to give it away. Okay. So generosity of the body can be by serving others, or, by giving parts of our body if somebody needs it. Now it's certainly much safer to give our body than it was in the time of the Buddha. Okay, the giving of fearlessness is giving protection to those who are frightened or lost or in danger. Okay, so this would certainly apply to helping travelers who are lost, to being aware of individuals who are being trafficked, because human trafficking is a big problem. We may not be aware of it, but it's a huge problem, and there's millions of people worldwide, and also in this country, being trafficked. And if we can help them, or, they always say if you suspect somebody's being trafficked, there's a 24-hour hotline. Call the hotline and let the professionals deal with it, because it can be a really tricky situation if they're with the person who is controlling them. Yeah. I read a website. I looked at a website. It was about, what was the name of it? Truckers Against Trafficking. Mm-hmm. And I would recommend it. There was a video on the website that told the story of a young girl. She was 14 or 15 at the time. And some people who were supposed friends of her friend lured her and her friend to another house and wouldn't let them go. And then, made them become prostitutes and hang out at truck stops and so on. And so it's an interview with her, and her mom's there. And it's very touching because she's speaking completely frankly and honestly about what her experience was like. And the way she got out of it was one trucker seeing her at a truck stop and suspecting that she was being trafficked and calling the hotline. And then law enforcement came and helped her. Okay, but it's not only sexual trafficking, but also in restaurants. And New York City is prime for that, with trafficked individuals working for virtually no pay in restaurants. Okay, so that's the generosity of fearlessness, of protection. And then the generosity of the Dharma is said to be the highest generosity, and that is sharing the Dharma with others. Yeah, so that doesn't mean that we have to teach others, but just discussing the Dharma with our friends. If people are having different problems, giving them a Dharma book to read, talking about the Dharma without, because so much of the Dharma is applicable to people, whether they believe in Buddhist tenets or not. So much of it is common sense, and you can talk about it to your friends, and it benefits your friends. Okay. Also, saying your recitations and mantras and prayers out loud so that your pets hear them or the animals and insects around you hear them. It puts a good imprint on their mind. Some of you may watch the Thursday and Friday night videos, the courses that we live stream and then archive at the Abbey. And when we don't have an overflow of people, we have the teachings in Ananda Hall, and we make sure our 4 cats attend. Yeah, and so they all sleep through the teachings, together with some of the students, and yeah, and but they get some good imprints that way. Okay. Then the second parami is ethical conduct. Okay, so in the Pali tradition, it's pure and blameless physical and verbal conduct. Okay, so physical and verbal conduct, actions of speech and body, they're much easier to regulate than actions of our mind, because mental actions, thoughts, emotions pop up into our mind and away we go. Okay, but the body and the mouth don't move unless the mind moves. So there's some lag time there. So this ethical conduct involves a lot in terms of the Pali tradition, taking the different kinds of pratimoksha precepts. So as a lay practitioner, this could be the 5 precepts or the monastic precepts. Okay, in the Sanskrit tradition, we add on the Bodhisattva precepts and the tantric precepts too. Okay, what are the 5 lay precepts? To abandon killing. And what's the second one? Stealing. Third one? No, that's the 4th one. What's the 3rd one? Oh, this is the one Americans don't like. No, that's the 5th one. Unwise and unkind sexual relationships. Yeah, funny how nobody could remember that one. Yeah, very strange, huh? The 4th one? Lying. Okay. And the 5th one? Yeah, not taking intoxicants. So it could be alcohol or recreational drugs or abuse of prescription drugs. And as you may or may not know, more people die in this country from abuse of prescription drugs than they do from abuse of recreational drugs. I mean, we have the opioid epidemic, and incredible numbers of people abusing pills and then shooting heroin, and then the heroin's mixed in with, how do you say it, fentanyl? Fentanyl, that's it, fentanyl. Which is very, very powerful. Just a few little grains, can like put you over the top. And so many people are dying of this. It's really epidemic proportions in the country now. Okay, that's the 5th one. So, taking precepts is, and keeping, as best as you can is very important. And the benefits of keeping the precept are enormous, because every moment that you are not breaking the precept, you are creating merit. So, for example, there could be 2 people, I'm sure there are 2 people in this room. One has the precept not to kill, and one doesn't have the precept to abandon killing. Both are not killing right now. Okay? The person who doesn't have the precept is not accumulating virtuous karma or non-virtuous karma, just, But the person who does have the precept because they're following that precept to abandon killing, is continuously creating the virtuous karma of abandoning killing. Yeah. So even though the two people are doing the same thing, sitting here, the difference in karma is noteworthy. Yeah, quite important. They also say that in our degenerate times, keeping the precepts, even for one day, creates much more virtuous karma than keeping them your whole life at the time of Buddha. So, really beneficial, and to keep the precepts. And the Dharmapada says, here's a quote, "Better it is to live one day virtuous and meditative than to live 100 years unethical and uncontrolled." Yeah? Because if we live unethical and uncontrolled, that's how we wind up with world wars. That's how we wind up with what's going on in the country right now. It's like, abandoning killing, people don't respect that. Abandoning stealing, let's be greedy and take all we can. Abandoning unwise and unkind sexual conduct, who does that? That makes you a prude. Abandoning lying, we're filled with fake news that is said to be true news, and true news which is said to be fake news, and government officials who are lying so much that you're, from one day to the next, it's just astounding. And then intoxicants, yeah. And so you see, when people have no ethical control, then we wind up in a mess, as a country. And especially, people not taking care with their speech. Just look at what happened in Charlottesville. Yeah, all the things of abandoning harmful speech, to abandon lying and divisive words and harsh speech and idle talk. Charlottesville was, a festival of the four non-virtues of speech, And then it was, certain people in the country just, fantastic, We call these people names, we intimidate them. That's really good. So, it becomes so evident when we look at what's going on, how important it is to live with ethical conduct. Yeah, and we can't just sit and point the finger at our dear president and others, and say, you should stop lying, because we're also a person, and what we do influences others, and so we need to clean up our own act. Yeah, many years ago, when I decided to ordain, one of the reasons, there were several reasons, but one was that I saw that I held a different ethical standard for myself than I did for other people. Yeah, so I grew up at the time of the Vietnam War, and similarly, government and the military-industrial complex and all that. These people are stealing, these people are lying, these people are killing, and that's bad. But when I lie, there's a purpose to it, and it's okay. Yeah, and when I collect food stamps when I really don't need them, that's okay. When I spray Raid around the house, that's okay. And so I started to see, I was just excusing my own behavior right and left, and then holding other people in the country, leaders saying, you should be good examples. And then I thought, I can't continue like this. I have to get my own act cleaned up. Yeah, so that was a big motivating factor for me. I don't like hypocrisy. And I was a hypocrite. Okay, the third one is renunciation. Okay, so this renunciation here is found, is based on understanding the unsatisfactory nature of everything in cyclic existence. So whether it's in the desire realm or in the states of deep concentration in the form and formless realm, none of those rebirths can give us any lasting kind of peace. Yeah, they're all transitory, they're all defective, and we get tangled up seeking them and getting attached to them. So renunciation is a real protection. And for bodhisattvas, it protects, it protects them, and it protects us, even if we're not bodhisattvas yet, from either extreme asceticism or for getting involved in our own afflictions or involved in the afflictions of others and indulging in sense pleasure and wasting a whole lot of time. Okay? So renunciation is very un-American because we are taught to, especially New York, sense city. Vegas is Sin City, but New York is sense, sense city. So many things here you can get and you can do, and you can become famous and powerful and meet people. And today we drove by the Apple store. There was a line clear down the block because apparently some new Apple widget is coming out today, and everybody wants to be the first one on their block to have it. Yeah, which means that they're the first one on the block to have the thing that has so many mistakes in it that hasn't been remedied by people complaining yet. Yeah. Okay, so renunciation is, really looking at our relationship to power, to popularity, to appreciation, material possessions, anything that we can get attached to, praise, yeah, and realizing that none of these things, is really going to cut it in the long run, and that we wear ourselves weary running after these things. Okay, and we go to great lengths, especially material possessions and sense pleasure and so on, but even fame and praise. But at the time of death, none of this stuff comes with us. It all stays here. Yeah? So you make a ton of money and you have, your house in Manhattan and your house in, where's the best place to have your house if you're in, I don't know, someplace else. I'm a West Coast kid, so I don't know where you get your vacation houses here. So, and you get all these things. When you die, none of it comes with you. And then all your children quarrel over it. Yeah, it's true. It's true. If you read some of these things, because I read the New York Times, and some of these very wealthy heiresses and so on, the way they're tricked and manipulated and then afterwards their kids are fighting about it, and so are their butlers and their nannies and their all these people, who profess so much love to the person, yeah, and so much harmony amongst each other until that person died, and then they're all grabbing at the money and the possessions. It's very sad, very sad. So here's a quotation from Dharmapala, what he says about the deceptive nature of sense pleasure. Sense pleasures are like a drop of honey smeared over the blade of a sword. Sanskrit tradition says like honey on a razor blade. It's a good image, isn't it? The honey is so sweet, the material things and love and appreciation and popularity, all the status, those things are like honey, they're so sweet. But when you lick the honey, it's on a razor blade and you get hurt. And this is the outcome of chasing these kinds of worldly things, is that we wind up creating a ton of destructive karma to get them and to protect them. Yeah. And at the end, we can't take them with us, but we take the karma with us. So sense pleasures are like a drop of honey smeared over the blade of a sword. They give limited satisfaction and entail abundant harm. They are fleeting, like a show perceived in a flash of lightning. Enjoyable only through a perversion of perception, like the adornments of a madman. That's very apt after what happened in Las Vegas, isn't it? Yeah? Somebody accumulating 25 weapons, thinking that was going to bring him happiness. The adornments of a madman. So these things are a means of vengeance, like a camouflaged pit of excrement, unsatisfying like a thin drink, subject to suffering through change, like the enjoyment of a festival, inwardly burning like the fire in the hollow of a tree, intensifying thirst like a drink of salt water, and giving little satisfaction like a necklace of bones. Dharmapala doesn't pull any punches. Yeah. Okay, so to give up these kinds of distractions. That was the third one. Then the fourth one is wisdom. So wisdom understands the general and the specific characteristics of phenomena, and it illuminates phenomena so that we can understand them without being confused or ignorant. And it arises on the basis of knowledge and concentration, and specifically knowledge of the four truths of the Aryas. So wisdom purifies all the other virtues and the other paramitas, which enables them to serve as the foundation for a Buddha's omniscient mind. Because wisdom sees things how they are on the conventional level, their deeper nature on the ultimate level. And so by seeing things very clearly, it sets the stage for omniscient mind. Okay, so wisdom, can start on some, lower levels. For example, just recognizing, being wise regarding the being entrapped by the attraction of samsaric pleasures, and then it proceeds onward to eventually to knowing both the conventional nature of phenomena and their ultimate nature. And so the Buddha always speaks of the wisdom, so this fourth one, the wisdom of learning, of contemplating or thinking, and of meditation. So we start out, we need to learn either by hearing teachings, reading texts, some way, studying of some sort. But that isn't sufficient. Then the second kind of wisdom is the one that arises from thinking about the teachings, contemplating them, discussing them with our friends, debating them with others. Okay, so really delving in and trying to understand them correctly. And then the wisdom rising from concentration is when we put them into practice such that they really start to transform our mind. Because meditation is the same verbal root as to familiarize or habituate, and that's where the transformation occurs. Okay, so that's the fourth one of wisdom. Then joyous effort is the fifth one. So this is physically and mentally working for the well-being of sentient beings. So joyous effort is free from both laziness and restlessness or agitation. Okay, so it is free of pushing ourselves, and it's free of just lying back and doing nothing. Okay, so we're very famous. We tend to be extremists. ISIS, they aren't the only extremists. We're extremists. In our Dharma practice, it's either we're lazy, and in the Buddhist tradition, there's three kinds of laziness. One is the laziness of procrastination. I want to do a daily Dharma practice, but I woke up too late today. I'll do it tomorrow. Then tomorrow, I went to bed so late last night, I don't have time today. I'll do my practice tomorrow. Okay, so the laziness of procrastination. Anybody here have that problem? Yeah. Then the second kind of laziness is, it is interesting. This is the laziness of being the busiest of the busy doing samsaric activities. Okay, it's what in America is called having a life. Okay, so it's, have you ever noticed that unless your calendar is completely filled with things, 3 weeks out at least, then you don't have a life. You're just a flake. If you have some free time tomorrow, you're hopeless. Nobody likes you. You should be booked up for 3-4 weeks, right? Yeah. It's amazing. And this is the one reason. I've also thought, in addition to writing a book with slogans of my mother, like, who do you think you are? Which is actually a profound question that I didn't understand until years later. It's a good question, isn't it? I heard that all through my childhood. I never understood what she was really asking. She was asking me the same thing as my Dharma teachers, Who do you think you are? Except she just said it in a different tone of voice. But, So I'm still contemplating that. Who do I think I am? So, Yeah, so this second one, the laziness of being the busy, we are always running. You know, we have to meet this person, and then we have this hobby, and then we have to work, and then we have this friend, and we have, this kind of social club, and then our volunteer work and our activist work, and, somewhere in there you squeeze in your Dharma, yeah, but you can't come to Dharma too regularly because you're so busy, yeah, I'm so busy. You don't understand, because I have to drive my kids here. Oh, sorry. In New York, you take your kids by subway. In the West Coast, we drive the kids. But, I have to take my kids here. I have to take my kids there, and, so busy. You have to go to soccer games and football games, although I don't see many playgrounds in Manhattan, There, I don't know what your kids do here. Maybe climb stairs. It's the only exercise there is. Yeah, but it's the same in Singapore. You hardly ever see children out playing. They all have, they go to school and they come home and then they get tutored. And they have mom and dad pushing. Okay, anyway, so that's the laziness of being the busiest of the busy because you have no time for the Dharma. And then, interestingly enough, the third kind of laziness is the laziness of discouragement. The laziness of saying, this is too difficult, I can't do it. I'm just not qualified. Dharma is wonderful, but I just must not have the Buddha nature because it's just too hard. I can't understand these teachings. Yeah, and I can't sit still to meditate, and I can't do this, and I can't do that, and so just forget it. That is called laziness in Buddhism, when we put ourselves down. Interesting, isn't it? But do you see why it's called laziness? We make ourselves lazy by our self-talk. So before I was saying how we're extremists. We either fall to the extreme of laziness or we go to the extreme of pushing ourselves. So Dharma practice is wonderful. Okay, I'm going to meditate in the morning, 1 hour in the morning. Okay, then I have a 15-minute break, coffee break. I'm going to meditate during my 15-minute coffee break. During lunch, gobble a sandwich, then I'm going to meditate. Yeah, come home, then I'm going to meditate. Yeah, and push. Yeah, I've got to, I've got to generate renunciation soon, and I've got to generate bodhicitta even sooner. And so I've got to really think so hard about the kindness of other sentient beings, how kind they've been to me. And concentrate and, really develop one of the meditative stabilizations on the kindness of sentient beings. Or we go on an ascetic trip. Okay, another form of extremism. I'm renunciate. I don't care about anything, So I'll sleep on the floor. I'll eat leftover food. I'll just go around in rags because I'm not attached to anything. I'll even stop bathing because I don't care. Yeah. When I practiced in Nepal, there was one monk who would go on an ascetic trip. Yeah. And I remember one time, Lama Yeshe, he would go around and check our rooms sometimes. And so this monk had the floors in the rooms where we slept were made of brick, so they were really cold. He had one thin grass mat on his floor, and Lama walked in, and said, "Who do you think you are, Milarepa? Go get a mattress. Stop this ascetic trip." Yeah. So, yeah, so we go to extremes, we just push ourselves, I've got to be the perfect Buddhist practitioner. I'm giving up everything for the Dharma, and I'm holy, I mean, you know how we are. So, so joyous effort is free of either laziness on one hand or this kind of extreme pushing ourselves on the other hand. Yeah. And we can see in our regular daily lives, how we vacillate from laziness to pushing ourselves. Yeah. Isn't New York the city of pushing yourself? Where everybody is trying to get ahead? New York and LA. Yeah. Everybody goes there. They've got to get ahead. They've got to be a success. Yeah. It's exhausting. Totally exhausting. Okay. So joyous effort, you don't get exhausted. You're joyous. You do your practice with happiness. And you're not exhausted. And there's a lot of self-acceptance when you have joyous effort. You accept what you're capable of doing right now and what you're not capable of doing right now. Yeah, and you do what you can do. You don't compare yourself to others. And you just know that slowly, slowly, if you keep practicing, you can improve. Okay, but this thing of self-acceptance is so important, to stop setting these unrealistic goals for ourselves. Yeah, so unrealistic. Yeah, I'm going to be at the top of the corporate ladder by age 35, or, whatever it is. And, what kind of life is that? Okay, so joyous effort is the fifth one. Then fortitude, or Tibetans usually translate it as patience, but fortitude is the sixth one here. It's the third one in the Sanskrit tradition. The reason I like the translation of fortitude is because fortitude implies internal strength. Patience, to me, implies waiting for somebody. Like, just be patient. Like, wait. Yeah. But fortitude is inner strength. It's a kind of resiliency. So even if people criticize you, you don't fall apart and crumble. Even if you experience suffering, in your career, in your health, or whatever, you can sustain. You have the internal strength to pass through it. Even when you practice the Dharma and different things come up in your practice, or something's very hard to understand, you don't give up. Yeah. So this internal strength or resiliency, which I think is a very important human quality to have, not only in the Dharma, but in all aspects of our life. Yeah. And this is something like we can see easily in many of the Tibetans who have been refugees. Yeah, we see it also in many of the immigrants to our country, people who went through who knows what in their country of origin, and they come here and somehow they are resilient and make a new life for themselves with a lot of joyous effort. Okay, so that's fortitude, and then so fortitude was the sixth, right? Then truthfulness is the seventh. Okay, so truthfulness is speaking without deception. And this is a very important quality to make ourselves a trustworthy person and a reliable person. So if we have the aspiration to benefit sentient beings, we have to learn to be truthful and not deceptive in any way. Yeah? And that is not always so easy because we like to cut corners and embellish stories and, make ourselves out to be the hero of the situation or the victim of others', bad conduct. So instead, just learning to be truthful and say things as they are without deception. Nagarjuna in Precious Garland, which actually Geshe Champa Chekchok just published his commentary on it. It's called Practical Ethics and Profound Emptiness. So I really recommend that. It's a commentary on Nagarjuna's Precious Garland. Anyway, Nagarjuna, throughout the book, in many contexts, he brings up the thing of truthfulness. And he also says that for something to be truthful, it must also be kind. So truthfulness with the intention to hurt is not truthfulness. Or should I say, saying things accurately, but with the intention to hurt someone is not truthfulness. Yeah? Okay, so what about saying something that's untrue to avoid hurting someone's feelings? Yeah, it depends on the situation, because sometimes we think I'm doing it so I don't hurt somebody else's feelings, but actually we're protecting our own reputation. And we don't want the other person to get mad at us. Okay? So, it looks like we think it's under the being kind, but if we dig deeper in our motivation, we actually want to hide something. Okay? So the thing about lying very often is that it's double trouble, because there's the initial action that we did, and then there's that we don't feel good about doing, and then there's the lie that we say to cover up for it. Okay, so Bill Clinton, good example. Okay, so the precept of unwise and unkind sexual behavior. Then I didn't sleep with that woman. Yeah. So, there's the first non-virtue, and then you want to cover it up with lying. Okay. Now, I'm sure Bill could say, well, I did that in order to not hurt Hillary's feelings. Yeah? So I said that so I don't hurt my wife's feelings. If he really didn't want to hurt his wife's feelings, he wouldn't have had the affair with Monica to start with. Okay? So you can see it would look like compassion, but it's really saving oneself. It's out of self-interest. Okay, so that's definitely lying. Yeah. One example that they often give is, the Buddha, when he talked about selflessness, he said different things to different people. So some people, he told them there's a self. And other people, he said there's no self-sufficient self, but there's an inherently existent one. And then other people, he said, there's no inherently existent self. Yeah. So somebody could look at it and say, either the Buddha was lying or he didn't know what in the world he was talking about, because he gave these different teachings and he said something different at each one. And the explanation of that is that the Buddha he was able, through his extraordinary mental powers, to see the disposition and tendencies and levels of ability of the different people in his audience. So he knew that some people, if he told them there was no inherently existent self, they would totally freak out and misunderstand what he was saying and think that there was no self whatsoever and that nothing existed, and that their falling to the extreme of nihilism would be extremely harmful for them. So rather than have them fall to that extreme by giving the absolutely correct view, he said, oh, there's a self. And in that way, it said he was actually being very skillful, because if he said to those people there's a self, they relaxed, but then he could go and teach them about karma and avoiding negativity and creating virtue, and they would practice that. And through practicing, that, then they would purify their mind and enrich their mind with merit, and that would make it possible in a future life for them to have to advance in their disposition, so that in a future life he could teach them that there was no inherently existent self. Okay? So it's saying that the Buddha there, he didn't lie. He was teaching with skillful means to accomplish what was best for different sentient beings according to where they were at. Okay? So that's a good example, because there you can see there was no self-interest involved at all. It was really for the benefit of others. Yeah. So being truthful, I don't think that necessarily means you tell everything to everybody. Yeah. I don't know about your family, but in my family, I was told sometimes directly and sometimes implicitly, there's some things we do not want to know about what you do. Or what happens to you, we don't want to know that. Yeah. So I actually was the kind of kid, I wished I could tell everything to my parents, but they didn't want to hear it. Okay? So, being truthful doesn't mean everything. You give people according to what they can handle. Oh, I can tell you stories about that one. Yeah?
Yes. One thing about being truthful, I don't remember where I heard it from, but I have found it very useful. And that is, truth without compassion is cruelty.
Mm. Yeah, so that's very similar to what Nagarjuna is saying. If you speak the truth, but you have the intention to harm, yeah, that's not really truthfulness. Mm. And it's even not really compassion.
Even if you are talking about, quote unquote, the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. But we have to be very careful with this, because our mind has a tendency to rationalize for our own self-benefit. You see? So that's what we have to be careful with. Yeah. So just think of Bill Clinton and, you know. You know, with Donnie, it's just, he doesn't even know if he's lying or telling the truth because he says different things from one day to the next. Yeah? Quite an amazing human being that way, isn't it? Do you find that as puzzling as I do? Yeah? One thing one day, another thing the next. Okay, then, so that was, that one about truthfulness was the 7th, right? Then the 8th is determination. So this is the unshakable resolve. So it's equivalent, you know, similar to the unshakable resolve in the Sanskrit tradition. So it's the unshakable resolve to fulfill our promise to liberate sentient beings and to perfect all the perfections. Okay? So it's a strong determination. It gives us the courage to remain steadfast in our practice. Because sometimes our mind is filled with afflictions and not very cooperative. Sometimes our body doesn't feel well. Okay, but this is a determination that keeps us going in a good direction. So quite important. Yeah. And then the 9th one is love, and by implication, compassion. So love is the aspiration to give happiness and the causes of happiness to other sentient beings. Compassion is the wish to free them from suffering and the causes of suffering. Okay. Yeah. So that's love. You can see how important that one is here. Oh, so the advantages of love. Okay, so these come in the Pali scriptures. They also come, Nagarjuna speaks of them also in the Precious Garland. So if you have love for others, you sleep peacefully. Yeah, when you're angry, difficult to sleep, isn't it? You sleep peacefully, you awake peacefully. You have no bad dreams. You are dear to human beings. I mean, people like us if we have love for them. You are dear to non-human beings, to animals, insects, and so on. You will be protected by the devas, the different gods or celestial beings. Fire, poison, and weapons cannot injure you. There's the story of the Buddha, and you know, if you think your relatives are bad, he had a cousin named Devadatta who was always trying to kill him. And Devadatta released a mad elephant one time who went charging towards the Buddha. And the Buddha meditated on love. And as the story goes, the elephant ran up and then bowed down to the Buddha. A beautiful story. Okay, so fire, poison, and weapons cannot injure you. Your mind becomes easily concentrated because you aren't distracted by all sorts of resentment and so on. Your facial complexion will be serene, clearly. You will die unconfused. You won't be, like all these people that you hate, thinking of them when you die. You will die unconfused. And if you do not attain a higher state, at least you will be reborn in the Brahma world, which is in the form realm. Okay, so here's another story from the Basket of Conduct, one of the canonical texts. So this is the story of Sama, who was a lad who lived in the forest taking care of his blind parents. When in a wood I was Sama, I brought the lions and tigers in the forest to love. Surrounded by lions and tigers, by leopards, bears, buffaloes, and by spotted deer and wild boar, I lived in the woods. No one was frightened of me, nor did I fear anyone. Sustained by the power of love, I delighted in the forest. Yeah. Beautiful, isn't it? Okay, and then the 10th one is equanimity, which is impartiality towards what is desirable and pleasing and what is undesirable and unpleasing, you know? So equanimity enables us to have a balanced mind no matter what comes our way. You know, we stop being the emotional yo-yo going up and down. Okay, so I finished the list. Yeah?
Thank you. Is there an order to these?
Yeah, I just taught them in the order. Okay.
But is there a rational order? For instance, I'm like wisdom being number 4 is highly placed seemingly before some of the others.
It right here, that's the next section. Okay, I'll read it to you. So generosity is first because it is comparatively easy to practice, and all beings, religious and not religious, practice it. So that's why generosity is first. Ethical conduct follows because while generosity benefits others, ethical conduct stops harming them. Okay, so they go together as a pair. Also, generosity is the cause of wealth, and to enjoy that wealth in the most suitable condition, a fortunate rebirth is needed, and ethical conduct is the principal cause for a good rebirth. So that's why ethical conduct is second. Yeah, renunciation is next because while ethical conduct refers to good physical and verbal conduct, renunciation involves good mental conduct because it means giving up attachment to sense pleasure and these things. Yeah, and also one who has renunciation can develop the meditative stabilizations without difficulty. Yeah, and a third reason why renunciation is next is we should abandon mental obsessions after abandoning harmful physical and verbal actions. Okay, so ethical conduct sets the stage for renunciation. Then wisdom comes next because in the absence of meditative stabilization, wisdom is difficult to develop. So renunciation helps develop concentration, so it facilitates the development of wisdom. And then also skillful means or wisdom for working for the benefit of others' welfare arises due to meditation focused on the well-being of others. Okay, so again, concentration based on renunciation facilitates wisdom. Joyous effort comes next because bodhisattvas undertake wonderful deeds to benefit sentient beings on the basis of understanding their emptiness. Okay, and because joyous effort follows upon the careful consideration and understanding involved in wisdom. So if you're going to have effort to do things, you better know what you're doing. Yeah. Fortitude comes next because it can balance the energy produced by joyous effort so that restlessness is calmed. Yeah. And because those with joyous effort must also persevere to accomplish their spiritual aims. And bodhisattvas must patiently endure hardship while joyously working to benefit others. And bodhisattvas who energetically aid sentient beings do not crave award or acknowledgement when they reflect patiently on the Dharma. Okay, so joyous effort and fortitude have a lot of interrelationship there. That's why fortitude follows. Truthfulness now comes because truthfulness sustains the resolve to practice fortitude. And while fortitude endures the harms of others, truthfulness keeps the bodhisattva promise to benefit them. And 3, bodhisattvas remain steady with fortitude when confronted with abuse, and with truthfulness, they do not give up on others. That's an important one. And 4, bodhisattvas have the truthfulness of wisdom developed through the fortitude of understanding the emptiness of sentient beings. We're going quickly through here, but you're getting some idea of the sequence. Determination comes next, because while truthfulness is non-deceptive speech, determination is the commitment to carry out the bodhisattva practices without wavering. So it's taking truthfulness up a notch. After gaining the truthfulness of wisdom, knowing things as they really are, bodhisattvas have strong determination to complete the collections of merit and wisdom required for awakening. Love is mentioned next because it sustains and supports the determination to work for the welfare of sentient beings. 2, after making a strong determination, the previous one, to work for others' well-being, love provides for their welfare. And 3, undertaking activities to benefit sentient beings proceeds well only when our determination is unshakable, and love makes it unshakable. And lastly, equanimity comes because when bodhisattvas are actively working to benefit sentient beings with love, they must remain equanimous to any harms or insults they receive. Very important. And 2, equanimity evolves from love. And 3, bodhisattvas remain equanimous even when even with others who wish them well and treat them well. Okay, so they can have equanimity not only with people who harm them, but also with people who benefit them. Okay, so it was a long answer to your question, but it's right here. I couldn't resist.
Venerable, there's one online question.
Sure.
In today's news, there was a story about Pat Robertson who blamed the Las Vegas killings on criticism and disrespect of the president. I think Pat Robertson really, really believes this, and so do a lot of his followers and Trump's supporters. My reaction to Robertson's statement is that it is totally untruthfulness. In fact, I believe it is downright delusional. Yet so many other people would agree with Robertson. Please help me to get a handle on this truthfulness perfection.
Okay, I'm unsure exactly what the person is asking for. Pat Robertson said something that person is saying is so delusional, so inaccurate, but he believes it's true. Yeah, but the perfection of truth, is speaking. Just put it this way: just because we think something is true doesn't mean it's true. Okay, so we shouldn't think that perfection of the truthfulness is speaking our opinion truthfully. Okay? Because our opinions are our opinions, aren't they? And so our opinions have to be based on some kind of rational argument or evidence. Yeah. So he was saying that the killing was caused by people not respecting the president?
Yeah.
It doesn't, those things don't have any relationship with each other, and they haven't discovered anything on the behalf of the killer that indicated they have no idea what his motivation was. Yeah. So maybe the way to clarify it is, truth is different than opinion. Yeah, and truth has to have a reasonable argument, and it has to have evidence. Mm-hmm. And so just because somebody says something, we should know after playing enough games. Remember that game in grade school of telephone? Yeah? Or there was, where you told something to somebody else, it said something to somebody else. And by, a few people down, it was like nothing like the original. So we should remember that, so often what people say, they're expressing their opinion or what they heard, and it doesn't mean that it's accurate at all.
I've lost where I heard or thought you had mentioned a rebirth in terms of this in terms of the Pali, and wondered, does reincarnation appear there, and how?
Oh yeah, I mean, the Buddha taught rebirth in the Pali sutras, in the Sanskrit sutras. This whole secular Buddhism thing that's saying the Buddha didn't teach rebirth is incorrect. That's a good example, yeah, of somebody saying something that is not accurate. It's right there in the sutras, if you read the sutras.
Is the reincarnation similar to the Tibetan view of reincarnation?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. The Pali tradition doesn't talk about like the clear light mind at the moment of death, but the whole idea of going from one life to the next, and the continuity of mind is the same.
Thank you for allowing a second question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering how would one phrase to oneself taking a precept in order to have it be successful both for accumulation of merit and for the benefit of others? I don't know quite how to phrase it to myself. Does that make sense?
I'm not sure exactly what your question is.
So,
are you asking about your motivation for taking precepts?
Say if you wanted to say not take intoxicants for one day, or to be really careful for one day, not to lie.
Mm-hmm.
Be very aware of this. Is there, would you...
Are there precepts that you could take that would help you do that?
Well, I want to know how to phrase it to myself, because it's just me with myself saying it. Then
you can make that determination yourself. You don't need to take an official set of precepts. You could say, tomorrow I really want to, not lie, and I'm going to be really careful about it, and make that strong determination yourself for what you want to do or not do. Yeah, that's fine. That's very good to do that. Yeah, you develop some self-discipline that way. Is that what you were asking?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.